Hey, I did a video a little while back about some front end mods I wanted to do. Got a vacation weekend and I got them on the bike, and here's the result. And here's the installation. Let's get it going. We're going to check out my tires. Are you just getting anything like this? Look how flat that profile is. There's supposed to be a tread right down the middle. It's just gone. Time for new tires. This is what I got. This is my Shinko 705s. Really love these. I love the way they look on the bike. I'm getting used to the way they handle, so they turn into corners a lot easier. Getting used to that. So far though, love them. I got these installed for me by Premier Moto Gear in Albany, Oregon. Also home of Mr. Ed's Custom Seats. You might check them out. Kind of a nationally renowned for their custom seats. You should check out their website. They did a great job. Really nominal charge to install these. Just great people to work with. Check them out. First thing I gotta do is figure out how to make this thing stay upright and get it up in the air. So these are just gonna be to stabilize. I'm gonna put it up on a jack and stabilize it with these. That's the plan. See how it goes. So I think the key here is a little at a time. Okay, so that was brake caliper bolts. Going to get the brake caliper off and just hang it up to the side, but we have to get off ABS sensor right here, and that's, you can see the wire that goes along right up here. So those kind of need to stay together once you get them off. Calipers. So I just want to remember what this bracket setup looks like. Here I'm taking the other caliper off. Okay, brakes off, fender off. Did I mention I got new tires? Just remembered I bought this. It would have been pretty handy for what I was just doing. Okay. This is an axle locking bolt that comes out, 6mm. I think it's time to do the axle. Okay, that's a 3/4 inch. There's the axle. Set that somewhere you don't get dirt on it. Whole bike is really dirty. I'll clean it after I get this job done. Now, fork's got to come off. And we've got a few Allen bolts that are going to come off, and they're supposed to just slide right out. It's a 6mm here and a couple 6mm down here. I did take a picture of the position of these forks, like how much of the fork is sticking up above this clamp, okay? Because I really want to make sure I get it back in the same place. I can lean the bike a bit, maybe. Get on it that way. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I'm just cleaning it up because I worry like sliding it through the clamp. If there's a bunch of junk on it or dirt, as I slide it through, it's just going to scratch the fork. So just in case. Pretty dirty. I'm going to clean those up. I was a little worried that the bike might not be high enough to get the forks out. It was high enough. I just had the front wheel off the ground an inch or two, and it seems to be fine. Because I'm putting these gaiters on, is I have to get this little protector off. And apparently it's a bit of a chore. You have to cut the back of it and then just separate it, you know, and do it all without scratching your fork or screwing up your seals right here. So don't screw it up. I saw a bunch of guys do this, but not much detail into how they got these off. Some guys said they like took a screwdriver and tried to knock the thing off until it came up. But it's got some grooves where you can't really slide it, okay? So you do have to cut it. And I kind of figured out the best way to cut it. I've got just a razor blade knife and go slow. That's the key. I'm just going to start a cut and just kind of work my way back through that line over and over, just giving some pressure on it. And my goal is why I'm doing it so slow is just I don't want to slip and screw up any other part of the fork. And I don't know if you can see, but each time I run across this, I'm getting a little bit further through that plastic. So it's kind of like just a patience thing, right? So yeah. It's easy to slip. That's why I'm going this direction, because it's not likely I'll scratch the fork lowers too badly, but the fork itself, if I was going the other way, I could scratch this pretty easily. Once I got through the other one, like all the way through it, I could really tell. So I mean, it just pops right apart. So just got to keep a little bit at a time. So I just felt it pop. And so again, my goal was to stay away from this seal and away from the fork. If you ever want to use these again, too bad, because these are done. So I decided to clean these off and just use a little IPA, little Rogue Newport Days. Actually, that's a hazy pale ale. So no, not an India pale ale, isopropyl alcohol. So that's my joke for the day. Isopropyl alcohol, wipe this thing down a little bit. Wipe it down a lot, actually, because I mean, there's a lot of stuff on here. If you lose track of like which side's which, forks have they've got an R and an L on them. Okay, this is kind of a moment of truth here. If these don't fit, I'm not going to leave my bike torn apart until I get different ones, so I might bail on the whole idea. Okay, that part so far so good. It slides on pretty good. And you know what? That bottom part fits really perfect. I mean, I don't know how that could be really any better fit. So these are basically going to go on here, you know, after I get this up into the bottom clamp. It takes a little pressure to get those on. They have some little nubs here that keep it nice and tight. When I bought all this, I got the upper covers, O-rings, for this little deal where you can see where it looks like a screw goes in there. It's just one of those plastic plug screws. On this clamp, on the top of this clamp, this guy lines up with a hole that's right in there. It basically keeps this thing in place on the fork, and that O-ring that sits down here just kind of create a tight seal down there. So I did check Partzilla, and they have great diagrams like how everything goes together on these bikes, because I thought maybe the O-ring goes on the top of that fork cover, but it does go on the bottom. It just kind of slides up inside the cover. Problem is, I may not be able to slide the fork once it gets jammed up in there, because it'll stop it, right? So I put a little bit of Tri-Flow. I put Tri-Flow on everything. Try getting this guy up in there and see if I get too much resistance. I've got it through to the top. O-ring is jammed in there pretty good, but again, it's just so it doesn't rattle around. I think it's doing its job, right? It's up in there, filling up any space. I mean, it's snug in there, and so it's not going to be bouncing around. The top of this fork needs to get back to where it was. And I took some pictures earlier of the top of the fork, so I'm going to look back at that. I'm going to snug these bolts down so that fork stays kind of where it's at. Okay, I've got both forks back in with the uppers. Fork gaiter starting to come together. I've got the wheel in there and the axle started. Just going to show you that there's a bushing right here between the wheel hub and the fork. You don't want to let those fall out when you take it off. But I forgot about it, and of course they fell out. And you just got to get them back in the right place. One on either side. Yeah, it's right in there. Right there. Using a socket wrench with one hand is stupid. So I'm going to get the axle torqued down to 65 Newton meters, I think is what it was. and then I'm going to want to set the torque on these clamps here and here. Okay, next thing is the sw-motech Fender. The bracket clamp, whatever you want to call it, holds on the brake lines over the fender. That is reused on the sw-motech Fender install, so you need to get that out. There's some little flares on the side of this thing. I think you can just squeeze them in and pop this thing out. There's just clips. Squeeze them in, it'll come out. Took me a while to figure this out, how to get this bracket back in place with the sw-motech bracket. Okay, this is two brackets that work together to hold all the brake lines and ABS thing in place. Okay, and they, so far what I figured out is these two brackets go on top of the sw-motech bracket. Screw goes between those three layers, then there's a bushing, the thinnest bushing they give you that goes behind that, then into the actual fork piece, okay? Other side is much more simple. You just put one bushing, a thicker bushing in the back, behind the back bracket, and just screw into the front bracket. They do recommend Loctite on these. I'm not putting that on yet until I've got things lined up. Here's the other bracket. This side's a little easier to figure out. In order to get this thing installed on the new Fender, they have you drill a hole in it. They give you this template, you put it on there, line it up, mark your spot. So I've got a spot marked here. I'm going to drill a 1/4 inch hole in this nice new Fender, and that's where my clamp is going to pop through. Okay, here is the hole in my Fender that I just drilled, and I managed to do it without getting any scratches. Of course, I went from the other side. And I used a 7/32 instead of a 1/4 inch bit. It calls for a 6.5 millimeter bit, which is slightly larger than a 1/4, and I went even smaller. So I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to get a super loose fit here. It looks like I might need to go with that 1/4 inch after all, but I'm going to check it out and see. If I need to go bigger, that's fine. I will, and then I'll get that mounted and then get the Fender on. So I'm going to put the Fender in this way. Got my brake cable bracket open. Just need to try to fit that in, because if you don't get that in before you put the Fender on, it's a bear to move the brake cables around to get them where they need to be. What I did is I got the new brackets on, just finger tight, make sure everything lined up, make sure the Fender fit on there and kind of lines up. Just have finger tight 2 screws out of the 4 in there, and making sure it's all gonna fit right. And I'm going back through and I'm pulling these screws out, getting some Loctite on the threads, and then screwing them back in. It doesn't give you any torque, but I'm making them fairly tight because I want this to be really secure and really tight. Okay, I have the Fender tightened up. I torqued the brakes to spec. It was pretty tough here. I mean, the screws they give you are so small to work with. I mean, I don't have big hands by any means, but the screws are hard to work with up here, like in here, these guys. And so I had to pull the Fender a little bit this direction back here to get the screw to line up, and then tweak things a little bit up front. So I loosened the screws and just kind of got things lined up before I could get these screws in. Some of them just still went in kind of hard. So curious to see if you guys have done this, run into anything similar. But now that it's on, I mean, I like it. I've always liked these, and I love what I'm ending up with here. Fork gaiters did come with some zip ties, really thin ones. It makes sense to me now that they go up here. I've got this little rivet or plastic screw that goes on the fork uppers that I've got to figure out how to get those guys in. They go right in here, and once, if you line them up, there's a hole that they just tap right into. So I'll just tap it with a, well, I don't know what I can get in here. Rubber mallet would be great, but I can't get that in there, so I'll just push it in there best I can. Let's see, I did get my axle lock bolt in there, torqued at spec. Okay, got it off the jack, front fender, fork gaiters, which cleaned up nicely, and fork upper covers.